Harp on Sports, the Bar Podcast Media Audio Radio Network. Follow, share, like, subscribe on all of our platforms. You can check out the podcast, The Bar, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and Apple Podcast. Of course, Harp on Sports YouTube channel, Harp on Sports Facebook page, and harponsports.com. Okay, what do we have in store for you? Getting primed up for a national championship game, right? College football playoff primer. And it's another SEC championship game. Here we go, another rematch. We've had a couple of rematches over the course of the last few decades. But, this one's a little bit different. It's not the changing of the guard, but it's a reflection of dominance. And what's at stake if Georgia wins? What's at stake if Alabama wins? Also, if Alabama wins, I'll be Saban's 8th title. It puts him in, rarefied air. He's the most decorated college football coach ever. Already. He's doing it in an era which is harder than any era that's ever existed. So, you start to compare him to other coaches, but I think this puts him above him. I'm going to give you a couple of facts and reasons why. I think this puts him above a Phil Jackson, above a Scotty Bowman, above a John Wooden. So we're going to look at that. Also, NFL season comes to an end. Going to look back on my preseason predictions, who I had going where, who I had winning what, how close did we get, and also look a little bit ahead to the postseason and what's at stake legacy-wise, what's at stake postseason-wise here. Also, what do we have now? 5 NFL head coaching openings, 5 as of right now. It's 6 if you count the Raiders. He's done a nice job out there, so I don't know exactly if that's going to stay open. Or if that's going to open up depending on what they do this weekend. But I do know this. I'm going to rank the openings, which one's the best situation as opposed to which one is the worst situation, at least the toughest situation. So there we go. We have openings for the Vikings, the Dolphins, the Jaguars, of course, have an opening. The Bears have an opening. The Broncos have an opening. So there we are with that. All right. And, oh, look. Hey, man. Overall, start to look ahead a little bit to the postseason, who we like, who could end up winning this thing, and how that correlates to my predictions. All right, let's start off with this first. We have a national championship game right in front of us. It's a rematch. We had a rematch a decade ago with LSU throwing down with Alabama, and then go back 15 years before then, roughly 15 years before then, when we had another rematch, when it was Florida and Florida State. The thing about rematches is the team that loses the first one comes back and wins the second one, at least on this stage, at least the last 2. With Florida coming back and beating Florida State, Alabama coming back and beating LSU. Now, what happens here in this one? Look, talent-wise, structure-wise, Georgia should win the football game. Georgia, let's face it, has had 3 bad quarters of football really all year. And they just happen to be the second, third, and fourth quarter against Alabama. Now, the way they looked against Michigan was dominant. Alabama struggled for a little while against Cincinnati before finally putting them away, but that was by design. One of the things that's funny about this is they didn't bury them. Well, that was the whole point. Cincinnati had that weird defensive front, that 3-3 stack, that the way they're putting pressure on, and Alabama took what they could get. They played the odds. We're going to grind this out. We're going to grind this out, and we're going to win the football game. Now, they won comfortably. There was never any doubt. But Cincinnati kept that thing competitive. Michigan, not even close to competitive against Georgia. Georgia, look, if you're asking me, I've got my old Alabama shirt on. How old's this thing? I had this thing when I worked in Mobile and in Huntsville. So this thing's 15 years old. I was cleaning up my closet, taking stuff out. I was like, does this thing still fit? Not too bad, right? Still fits a little bit. Saban, for history's sake, for discussion's sake, I'd like to see Alabama win. Just because that era of greatness and what a win would mean for him, which I'm going to get to in a second. But if Georgia wins, look, Kirby's due. Either of these programs, I'm not in love with either of these programs. I'm just not. Kirby always blows it on the big stage. He always has. Does he eventually get over the hump? I think this is the time. I do. I think Georgia's going to win the football game. But still, coaching-wise, assessment-wise, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the third and fourth quarter. There's only been twice I can ever remember on a big stage where Alabama was so outmatched there's nothing Saban could do. No adjustments that he could make. And it was against Ohio State in the college football playoff and against Clemson in the national championship game the one year. Those are the only 2 times I ever watched an Alabama team, at least on this stage, going, well, he's overmatched. There's nothing he can do. No matter whatever he pulls out of that bag, there's nothing in there. This should be closer than that. But let's not forget, Georgia did come out like gangbusters in that first matchup. I think Georgia wins the football game just because Georgia has more talent. You never thought you'd say that, right? And here's what it's interesting. I should rethink how I said that. Georgia has more upperclassmen talent. Georgia's 4- and 5-star guys are juniors and seniors. Alabama's 4- and 5-star guys are sophomores and juniors. And here's what's interesting about this. Alabama's going to be a better version of themselves next year. Alabama's going to be so good next year. Going to be so salty. This was the year that you were supposed to be able to get them. But, looking at that, there's a couple things that this means if Georgia wins. If Georgia wins, that'll be 3 different SEC teams that have won the last 3 different national championships, the last 3 championships. Right? Georgia will have won it this year. Alabama will have won it the year before. LSU will have won it the year before. And, taking a step back farther, Clemson won it the year before that. So, we talk about sports and parody, depending on how this works. This would be 4 different champions the last 4 years. Can either sport give you that? Can they? Can baseball give you that? Baseball can give you that, right? Sports that people complain about buying championships and it's unfair. If Georgia wins, it'll be 4 different champions the last 4 years. When's the last time you can go back in college football and say that you went 4 years with 4 different champions? I mean, I have to go back and rack my brain and really, really look at it. I'm sure you can find it there in the 2000s before Florida won their back-to-back. Or Florida won 2 out of 3, but you'd have to really look at it to find 4 different champions over a 4-year stretch. That's if Georgia wins. Also, it's funny, I look at this. That'd be the 3rd different team in 3 years to win from the SEC. To go back and find 3 different champions in a time frame out of the different conferences, it's fascinating. So fascinating. You think, okay, that'd be 3 different champions the last 3 years for the SEC. Find me a conference going back and finding their 3rd championship team. Because it would be LSU would be the 3rd championship team on this totem pole, right? 2019. What would be the 3rd champion in the ACC? Do you know what it would be? Well, you go, Clemson, check. Miami hadn't joined the ACC yet when they won. So it wouldn't be Miami. It'd be Clemson, check. Then what it would be? It'd be Florida State, check. You know what it'd be? It'd be Georgia Tech, 1990. So you have to go back 31 years for the ACC to get to that 3rd team. The Pac-12 is just obscene. The Pac-12 is like, 1958 with UCLA? Because you'd have USC check, Washington check. Oregon had a chance, never got there, or never was able to do it. But then you have to go all the way back to the 50s to UCLA. So think about where you are with LSU just 2 years ago. And to get to that 3rd team out of the Pac-12, you'd have to go back almost 70 years. I also look at it from the Big Ten's perspective. This is equal. It's not equally as long, but it's gaudy. You'd have Ohio State that won it 6 years ago, right? 7 years ago. You have to go back to Michigan in the late 90s. And then to find a 3rd Big Ten team, you have to go back to the 60s in Michigan State in the mid-60s. And then the Big 12, you combine the Big 12 and the Big 8, you can get there a little bit quicker with these teams. You just can. Because you would get Texas. But even Texas was 17 years ago, 16 years ago. Texas, Oklahoma. And then the 3rd one in that pecking order would be Nebraska. Of course, Nebraska part of the Big Ten now, but you can get 3 champions out of the Big 12 in the last 23 years. But the SEC, you have to go back 23 years to get 3 champions out of the Big 12. And 2 of those teams are joining the SEC. The SEC get 3 champions the last 3 years. So that's why it's fascinating on that standpoint. When it comes to Nick Saban and his greatness, it becomes unparalleled. It really does. Comparing it to Phil Jackson per se, what Phil Jackson did, it's a different skill set. 11 championships in the NBA, but he had 2 Hall of Famers at his helm. Still won them. Nobody else could win with them. Right? How many coaches the Lakers have? 3 different head coaches before Phil Jackson got there. I think Shaq and Kobe together were 3 years before Phil got there. Didn't win a title with them until he got there. Just impressive. But he did have Kobe and Michael Jordan. Not taking anything away with it. It's impressive. Scotty Bowman, the championships that he won, the Stanley Cups that he won. But let's face it, he did have Patrick Waugh. He did have a Red Wings squad that had, 3 Hall of Famers on it. So, I mean, he's in pretty good shape when he had those teams, but he still was able to coach. Pro sport's a little bit different. You know, what Lombardi was able to do, but then again, how many NFL teams were there? 12? 14? A little bit different era. So, I look at what Saban's done collegiately, and you basically have to compare him to other collegiate entities. You know, going back and trying to compare Nick Saban to Casey Stengel, I mean, come on. And, you know, even go like Ralph Houck and what he was able to do with Mickey Mantle and those teams. But good gracious, man, DiMaggio and Mantle. So here's what makes Saban special. You'd have to look at like a guy like John Wooden. And I think the comp for Nick Saban is John Wooden. I really do. John Wooden won 10 championships. This would be Saban's 8th. You know, Krzyzewski's got 5 at Duke? And Krzyzewski has 5 championships with 4 different eras, right? He's got the Leitner-Hurley era. Then he has the early 2000s championship, which would be the Jay Williams. I mean, it was the year after, 2 years after, right? It was 2 years after a lot of those studs left, the Elton Brands of the world, right? So the Battiers, that was the Battier. I guess that'd be the Battier era, right? Battier was a senior on the team. So you have the Hurley era, the Leitner era, the Battier era, and then you come late 2010 era, which is when they beat Butler in the championship game. So then you have another era, and then 5 years later he was able to win another one. So Krzyzewski's won 5 titles with basically 4 different teams. It's impressive. It's extremely impressive in that sport. But that's over 40 years. Saban's done all this in 20. Krzyzewski's success is over think about it. Saban didn't win his first national championship. Krzyzewski's won 2 since then. In the span that it's taken Saban, he's won 7, going for his 8th. Krzyzewski's won 2. Different eras, although, Krzyzewski's 5-6 years older than Saban. So I look at this and, try to comp it to John Wooden. John Wooden won 10 national championships. 6 of them were with Alcindor and Bill Walton. Looking back on it, and here's what's impressive. Wooden won, I believe it was 3. Wooden won 2-3 before Lou Alcindor started to play. So it was like, without Lou Alcindor, he still wins 4 national championships. You can remove, think about that. We look at Krzyzewski as the dominant with 5, at least in our era, and Jimmy Calhoun has 3. Right at UConn. I'm looking around at, other guys that are comparable. There's nobody really in there. I mean, Boeheim's won 1. Trying to think of guys that have won 2. Patino's won a couple. Well, who knows if those count anymore. Jay Wright at Villanova's won a couple. But, you look at the comp and at least how that sets up. Krzyzewski's won 5. You remove Alcindor and Walton. Wooden still wins 4. Think about that. You remove Alcindor and Walton, he still wins 4. So I go through and I start to check the boxes here a little bit on some of these things. And good gracious. He won 3 with Alcindor, then won, 2 in the middle there without Alcindor and without Walton, then comes back and wins a couple more. And then Walton loses his senior year. Was it to NC State? So that's the comp. But here's what makes Saban special compared to everybody else. If Alabama wins a national championship against Georgia, Saban will have 8 national championships with 7 different starting quarterbacks. I'll say that again for those in the back. If Alabama beats Georgia, that'll be 8 national championships for Nick Saban. 7 different starting quarterbacks. Let's see if I can do them. Matty Mock, LSU. Greg McElroy, Alabama. A.J. McCarron, Alabama, and McCarron won 2 for him. McCarron won 2. So that's third quarterback, 3rd and 4th championship. And then you had Coker for that 1 year. And then what we have? Then Tua comes in and wins it for him. It hurts his team, but Tua wins it. We're only going to count one of those, so let's count it just as Tua winning that championship. So that's quarterback number 5. And then you have last year, right? Mac Jones is quarterback 6, and Bryce Young would be quarterback 7. Think about that. Alabama wins. It'll be 7 different of the 8 national championships Saban has won. 7 different quarterbacks. Isn't that why he's got to be the greatest? It's one thing, what Pete Carroll did at USC, but Matt Leinart was his quarterback for all that. And look at the success, really, that Dabo had at Clemson. Excuse me. But, Taj Boyd was good. Didn't win him anything. Deshaun Watson won him a title. It was good. Deshaun Watson was amazing. And then Trevor Lawrence comes in and wins another one. But those are 2 big studs. Now, if he wins another one with another guy, okay, well, that'll be 3 different quarterbacks. Think about how dominant Saban has been. Let's say in the next 4 years, Dabo Swinney wins a national championship with 2 different quarterbacks. Okay, then he's halfway to what Saban's done. Technically, Urban Meyer won 3 with 3 different guys. Right, you count Chris Leak, then Tim Tebow, and then, Cardell Jones, or depending on your perspective there at Ohio State, but it was Cardell Jones, right? So there you go. I think Alabama wins. Sorry, Alabama. I'm wearing my Alabama shirt, but I think Georgia wins. I do. Give me Georgia 24-21. I think Georgia beats them. NFL. Looking at my NFL preseason predictions, how far off I was at the beginning of the year. And the NFC, I said that the Rams would beat the Buccaneers to go to the Super Bowl. In the AFC, I said the Titans would beat the Browns to go to the Super Bowl. The Rams would beat the Titans in the Super Bowl. And your NFL MVP would be Derrick Henry. And your Defensive Player of the Year would be Aaron Donald. Well, I have a chance to get 3 of those 4 teams in their conference championship games right. Titans are the 1 seed. Rams aren't. I just didn't bank on Aaron Rodgers and the Packers having a happy ending here. Too many question marks at the beginning of the year, and it worked. At least in theory it worked, right? So that's what I had. Now, the MVP is not going to be Derrick Henry. It's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and it should be Aaron Rodgers. Defensive Player of the Year, it's probably not going to be Aaron Donald. It's probably going to be T.J. Watt, and it should be T.J. Watt. In the NFC, if you had to make a prediction right now, I think you would say the Packers and the Bucks and let the chips fall where they may. If you say the Bucks are going to knock them off in Green Bay, okay. That's one of those, it's kind of like Alabama, Georgia. I think Georgia's going to win. If somebody says, no, I think you're wrong, Harper. I think Alabama's going to win. Oh, look, I see it completely. That's not one of those, I disagree. No. Okay. There's sometimes where I think something's going to happen. I make a prediction. I get big games right a lot. I do. I think I've gotten with and against the spread 8 of the last 10 national championship games. That's the great thing about Twitter is you can go back and look. You've gotten 8 of the last 10 right. 8 of the last 10. So I was sitting here and I was thinking about this, and I'm not going to argue either of those, argue against it. But if I had to make a prediction right now, I'd say in the NFC, I think the Packers beat the Bucks in Green Bay to go to the Super Bowl. I do. In the AFC, I think the Chiefs beat the Titans. A lot of that hinges on Derrick Henry. I think the Chiefs can win in Nashville. I don't think Nashville could win in Kansas City. But Derrick Henry, there's too many. If Derrick Henry plays in the AFC Championship game, then I'll pick the Titans, and it looks like he could play. But without knowing yet, right now, today, I'd pick the Chiefs to beat the Titans. If Derrick Henry can play, I'd pick the Titans to beat the Chiefs. So looking at it right now, I think the Packers beat the Bucks. I think the Chiefs beat the Titans. I think the Packers beat the Chiefs, and the Packers win the Super Bowl. So I think it's going to happen. Could there be some upsets? Yeah, I think there could be. I think the Rams are going to have their hands full with the Cardinals, but that game on Monday night, just a bizarre matchup. I think the Cowboys are strapped with the Niners. They're going to have, that's the one that wouldn't surprise me if San Francisco beat Dallas. It wouldn't. Not at all. Wouldn't. I do see Dallas having a tough time if they beat San Francisco to going to Tampa and winning. And there's two things. There's no way on earth. Look, I shouldn't say no way on earth. The Eagles aren't going into Tampa and winning. And the Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, the Steelers aren't going into Kansas City. I think that Kansas City thing's got like 31-9 written all over it. I do. So there's that. One to wrap with the coaches. At least that's how I look at the postseason right now when it comes to the NFL. The head coaching openings. Right now we have 5, right? Looks like the Giants are going to keep Joe Judge. Whatever, man. Good luck. That's one of those I just don't get. I don't. You look at that division and where that division stands. Dallas has got the market cornered, right? Washington, Philly. Is this Jalen Hurts thing going to work? And then you have the Giants who need to make a decision on what they're going to do. And it's another year of mediocrity. But 5 head NFL coaching openings. I don't know what the Raiders are going to do. You keep hearing Harbaugh's name and Harbaugh's interested in the Raiders. That's not open yet. It's not. Interim coach makes the playoffs. What do you do? I think they'll make a change. I do. Now, if they go and win a postseason game, that makes things even more complicated. But we'll see. The official openings as of right now. I'll explain that cough in a second. The openings right now. The Jaguars. The Vikings. The Broncos. The Dolphins, which that one surprised me a little bit. That one did. And the Bears. So I went through and ranked these in order, what I think is the most appealing. I think of all those jobs, the one that's least appealing is the Vikings. Kirk Cousins is making what he's making. I guess you can move on with him, but it's going to hurt you. That's, a rebuilding mode. Is the one good thing about that is the Bears are down in that division. The Lions are down in that division. The Packers, if Aaron Rodgers leaves, it's ripe if you find the right guy. Is the quarterback from Pitt the right guy? Is Matt Corral the right guy if that's what you choose to do? The Vikings don't really have the capital to go out and make a big trade for somebody. So, to me, the Vikings, of those 5, are the least appetizing. Following the Vikings, the Broncos. Now, the Broncos did make a run, allegedly, at Aaron Rodgers. Are they going to make a run at Deshaun Watson? Are they going to make a run at Russell Wilson? Are either of those guys going to be available? That's what makes that interesting as well. So, who knows? They're going to go back after Aaron Rodgers again? I don't know. So the Broncos at 4, just because it's 5 years without making the postseason, 6 years. So I think there's a sense of urgency there. In terms of openings, the third one on my list is the Bears. Now you have Justin Fields, young guy. If you believe in Justin Fields, it's a good job. Got some cap room to work with some things. If you don't believe in Justin Fields, it's bad because you don't have a first-round draft pick this year. And if you don't believe in that guy, oh boy. Oh boy. I think they end up with an offensive-minded guy look, if Byron Leftwich doesn't get the job with the Jaguars, I think he ends up there. Kellen Moore ends up there. Doug Peterson, that type of guy is going to end up with the Bears. Guy that can put a quarterback under his wing. 2, in terms of the most attractive job in the NFL as a head coach, I wrote down the Dolphins just because I think Tua has done enough to show that he can make that work. I know that there's a ton of draft capital there that they're thinking. I know they don't have a first-round draft pick this year, but they want to win big. They think they can get Deshaun Watson to waive his no-trade clause. So, look, if I'm a head coach and I'm coming to Miami, it's a team that's had 2 winning records the last 3 years. They're back-to-back winning records, right? Dolphins have had back-to-back winning records. Now, why did Flores get canned? Apparently his relationship with the GM and management and the owner was bad. Too many coaching changes. They didn't like all the disruption. So that's why that opening is there. I think Caldwell or Peterson probably end up getting that job. They want somebody with head coaching experience. They did say they ruled out Harbaugh. And the Jaguars are the most attractive job. And you may sit there and laugh at that with Balky and everything going on. But no, here's the thing. I got my hands on Trevor Lawrence. I can get my hands on Trevor Lawrence. And not only that, I've got the most cap room in the NFL. Regardless of who the GM is, any other position, the Bears, the Vikings, the Broncos, that's all nice. I've got Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback, and I've got the most cap room in the NFL. That's why that's the most attractive job. because I can, with one good draft class, and I've got Etienne coming back, who's basically a free draft pick. I've got $70 million in cap space or whatever it is. I can go 7-10 next year in Jacksonville. I'm going to have a last place schedule, number 1 overall pick. So there you go. Oh, predictions and all these things. If Balky stays, it looks like it's going to be Bill O'Brien. He'll turn it around. He'll have success there. I don't think he's a coach who can win you a Super Bowl. I think the Dolphins end up, they're talking about like a Doug Peterson type of thing. I think that's who they end up with, although apparently they love Jim Caldwell as well. I think the Bears go a little bit outside the box, and the Jaguars thing all hinges on whether or not, not all hinges on whether or not Balky's the GM. And I think winning on Sunday actually helped his case a little bit. I do, even though I don't know how much he had to do with it, but kind of cooled the Jets. If they'd have gotten their doors blown off, I think would kind of mess things up a little bit. The other one, Chicago, I think Kellen Moore, I think they're going to end up hiring Eric Bieniemy. I think Eric Bieniemy is the one that ends up in Chicago. I do. I think that's where he finally ends up. And then Denver and Minnesota, good luck. Good luck either of those places. I could see Brian Flores. I could see Flores ending up in Minnesota or Denver. I could see both of those things happening. And then other coaches. Too early in the game. So that's how I think that all shakes down. All right, there we go. Coughed a couple times during the podcast. I am getting over COVID. I don't know what variant I had, but it wiped me out. Anybody that said I can't smell or taste anything in 5 days, can't smell or taste anything, nothing. I lit like 4 candles in my place, can't smell anything. I can taste sensations, like I can taste that, like orange juice. I can taste the acidity and the coldness, but I can't taste the flavor. And I can't taste what I'm eating either. Hopefully I can lose some weight. But anybody says, oh, this is eat some soup and you sit around for a couple days. Yeah. Bullshit. It didn't wipe me out, man. I can breathe again. That's why it took me a week to do a podcast. But I'm on the mend. So there you go. Georgia's going to win the national championship. Some predictions there. We'll do some more predictions game by game going into the NFL coming up here later this week. There we go. It's been The Bar. Spotify podcast, Buzzsprout. You want to check it out. Also YouTube, Harp on Sports, the Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, harponsports.com. Remember, stay clean, stay focused, stay strong. Frankenstein. Have fun with your friends.